Hello, everyone. I'm Keith the Stone from the Center for Hellenic Studies. I'm here as usual with Greg Nagy and Sarah and Elen. We're missing our friend and colleague Janet, but she'll be back with us soon. We're here to discuss for v16 of HeroesX the discussion questions, Greg, that you posed for hours 5 and hour 6. The hour 5 question, as you wrote it here, is as follows. In hour 5 of H24H, it took me twice as long to say what I wanted to say compared to the average length of the other chapters or hours. Sometimes I, Greg, ask myself, was it worth it? But I ask the question differently here. Do you think that reading the songs of Sappho makes a difference in your overall view of Achilles? So we're still talking about Achilles this week. What are folks saying about this?
Yes, well, they seem to like Sappho, really. And one participant says that Sappho's wording places Achilles as someone who can be on the same level as the gods, equal to the gods. The connection, ideal bridegroom, similar to the gods, transformed into a god by the marriage ritual. And the participants seem to indicate that it makes Achilles more lovable. I mean. Good. Because we have not enough support from the surviving tradition. We don't have so many different angles that the ancient world had for viewing Achilles. And if we have only the Iliad, even though the Iliad is such a treasured repository of so many angles, nevertheless, the angle of Achilles as a, how shall I say it, somebody who's capable of loving somebody is shall we say, impoverished. And so I found over the years that introducing the readers to Sappho at this stage, at this very early stage of our encounter with heroes, helps us understand that this character was dearly loved by a wide spectrum of personalities, including the personality that we see coming to the fore in the songs of Sappho, which is a very sensitive woman's voice.
Yes, someone else has been commenting that, yes, it's good to see this other side, perhaps a softer side, the more loving side, the sort of person who could have relationships and so on. But then it made that contrast with what we see in the Iliad almost all the more extreme, how extreme he is in the Iliad.
Yes. And we were talking the last time we met about certain moments where Achilles is channeling what a woman would say. And I had mentioned how he compares Patroklos when Patroklos weeps to a young girl, or when he compares himself to a mother bird. That's all in 9. And we don't get that kind of sensitivity in Iliad 1, for example. And even in Iliad 9, yeah, there's sensitivity, but it's still, well, I would say a restricted view. So I'm so glad that our participants are pleased to have this other angle, this other perspective that we can achieve from Sappho. And also, it's hard for us to understand ritual if we simply read the Iliad and nothing else at the beginning. And the so-called wedding songs of Sappho are really such a beautiful example of what I call the ritual mentality. And as you three know, my working definition of ritual is very broad. It's any kind of conventional behavior in a traditional society that is set aside as somehow special. So they're everyday things, and then they're special things, and that's all I mean by ritual. And certainly experiences like getting married or having a child. So many of these things that we don't think of as ritual, I would think of as ritual, because I try to view human experience from may I put it this way, a traditional point of view, by looking at a wide spectrum of what societies, especially traditional societies, are accustomed to. Well, not so much think as a group, but what in a traditional society is thought of as customary, as somehow part of social identity. Oh, I'm being very apologetic about the word ritual, but I think it's good to be apologetic, since in our world, I think there are overly narrow understandings of the word. People think it's something mystical, or people project all sorts of thought patterns that we associate with religion. And even with religion, we could broaden our view, couldn't we, about what religion is? And I have a very broad view of religion as well, because I like to look at things cross-culturally. Well, that's being too long-winded about something that maybe I shouldn't be apologetic about. But Sappho, for me, is such a shot in the arm. Excuse the metaphor. I think shots in the arm can be good.
Yes, I think that the emotional aspect, which we've seen to some extent in the laments that we were talking about last time, and I think people are joining the dots there even more, thinking about all of this in context where these would be performed, as you say, in a ritualistic sense, and that would include the poetry of Sappho, presumably.
Yes, exactly, and I think oftentimes Sappho herself is overly stereotyped as having an emotional capacity that, in kind of popularizing ways of thinking about Sappho, would concentrate on homoeroticism. Of course, there's that, but even homoeroticism has to be viewed in terms of traditional societies where growing up usually involves not just going from stage A to stage Z, but stage A to B to C to D. Okay, we skip LMN or whatever, but lots and lots of different stages in the, may I say this in French, dear Hélène, and I hope I'm not massacring your beautiful language, the formation of a human. And they have to go through stages. And even when it comes to things like sexuality, there are many different stages that people go through, especially in traditional societies. Anthropologists have a fancy word for it, age class. So it's not just, hi, I'm a girl. Oh, hi, I'm now married. Wow, that's skipping a whole bunch of stages as far as the worldview that is reflected in the songs of Sappho, for example.
And whole communities would participate.
And the whole community, exactly.
Even if they're not themselves passing from one stage to another, right?
And thank you, dear Sarah, for pointing that out. And that's why in a book that we're not asking the participants to read, but if anybody wants to look at it, called Poetry as Performance, I compare Sappho's songmaking more directly than I do in the book to, for example, Apache female initiations, which are so complex, and where you, just as you say, dear Sarah, the transition from one way of thinking to another is participated in by by the whole community. It's not just by the girl who goes from stage X to stage Y.
Well, yeah, but there is it's just that there is a comment that is in House 5, but could go as well with House 6. Because one participant comments that he, widely disappointed that Achilles' death is not narrated in the Iliad.
well, yes, we're disappointed, but for, I think, the ancient Greek song culture, that was such a traumatic moment that, in a sense, Patroklos is our ritual substitute. By our, I mean, for us, I don't know, 6th century Athenians. It's just too painful to experience the death of Achilles. So the surrogate, the alter ego experiences it. And that makes it a little more tolerable, the pain, but the pain has to be there. But for us, that's so alien, isn't it? Why should it hurt to hear about the death of Achilles? But it did for them. I'm sure of it. That is a wonderful transition. And you know what, dear friends, I'm not feeling guilty that we spent more time on this particular hour, because after all, even in the book, I spent 2 times as long as anywhere else in talking about something very important. So okay, Greg, no guilt for you, Greg, no guilt.
Well, let me formally inaugurate this part of the discussion by reading the question. To die as a therapōn, for someone else is to identify with that someone else. Patroklos certainly dies for Achilles, but to what extent does he really identify with him?
Ooh, you know, every time we go back to this kind of thinking, I just really have to experience what's going on, as I imagine, in the minds of Achilles and Patroklos. So this is a very challenging question.
Yes, and we had many answers, and many good answers. And one of them is Patroklos seems to have the same goals as Achilles, but without the foreknowledge of his death.
Oh, I think that's right on the mark. Yes. Except that I would add that Achilles himself does not have a full knowledge. That's why he's still making up his mind in Iliad 9. I used to think that he had his mind made up already, but now I don't. I think he's still struggling with what the 2 choices he has really amount to. And he knows that his mother understands fully. He doesn't yet, I think, understand fully. I think the pain of losing his alter ego, Patroklos, in 16, and then what happens in 17 and 18, and that pain has to kick in still. And then and only then, I think, will he be more aware of what kind of a death he has to experience.
Another perspective is that he is not only the other self, but the best self or side of Achilles. So he's enacting that, you know, at the stage at which we see him. Perhaps we've got this
I like that.
The small window into the whole Trojan War in the Iliad. But at this stage, Achilles is withdrawn from the fighting. He's angry, and Patroklos is the one who is identifying with everybody and with Achilles.
Yes, and really he is the savior at that point, not Achilles. Isn't that true? Is that he's the one who stops the fire of Hector. Technically, if the fire of Hector had reached the beached ships of the Achaeans, there they are like sitting ducks lined up on the shores of the Hellespont. If those ships burn down, the premise of our Iliad, at least, is then we Greeks wouldn't exist.
They've also pointed out he's the first who gets this, equal to a daimon.
Yes, he gets. May I put it this way? All the ritualized descriptions of the role of Achilles. He gets those descriptions, and they are ritualized. Epithets are not just ornamental; they are deep in meaning. They really, epithets are what my late friend Nicole Laureau described as a micro récit, a miniaturized story, a story that is told in one word.
And there is also one question, an interesting one. Could we say that at the moment of his death, Patroklos had actually freed himself of Achilles and died for himself alone?
Wow. Well, I think even in New Age discourse today, whatever New Age is, people say there's some things you have to do alone, like die or experience a dental procedure or all sorts of things. Yes, it is a very individualized death, isn't it? And yet the whole community can vicariously experience the death of Achilles, going back to the point that we discussed earlier. Yeah.
They end up in the same tomb for all the fact that they
I love that.
only
Keith.
one dies inside the Iliad and one dies outside.
That's a beautiful way to think of it. Yes. This way, it's not a double death. It's each death is particularized. I'm using a term that Milman Parry loved to use, particularized experience, as in a particularized epithet. It's where an epithet suddenly just comes to life because everything comes together, and you say, "Oh yeah, that's why somebody was called such and such." A good example, of course, is rosy-fingered dawn, or as Milton understood, rosy-toed dawn, because the dawn goddess dances. And so when you have that epithet, you know something very special is going on.
So you were just talking about them coming together in the same golden urn in the same tomb. In life, a couple of people have been picking up on the fact that socially and in very many other ways, Patroklos is inferior to Achilles. So does this mean then that the death does make them equal?
Well, I would like to propose a friendly amendment. It's not that he's inferior, but what if we use a psychological term, which the ancient Greeks wouldn't understand maybe, but they expressed it very well in other ways: dominant and recessive, dominant personality, recessive personality, which implies that really both have the characteristics. It's just that in role playing, and while it's not play, it's dead serious, in enacting roles, there's a dominant side and a recessive side. I'll just go back to that term. I really love that term because it fits linguistically into, for example, even what Homeric language is. It's dominant Ionic and recessive Aeolic, which is, by the way, Sappho's tradition. I mean, Sappho's tradition going farther back, and then you have to go forward from that earlier stage of reconstruction. So anyway, I think they're both equally, well, they're both equal to Ares. Can't I just say it that way? And they're both equal to Apollo. What better way to say that Patroklos cannot be really inferior the way we think of inferiority? Beautiful questions. I think this group of participants is really bringing out so many very important things, and you really have to drill very deep into this beautiful artifact to recover such gems. I love it.
I can't help but think that there are many ways in which Patroklos is identified with Achilles, regardless of whether we can imagine or are given evidence for the character of Patroklos actively identifying himself with Achilles.
Yes.
Certainly the master narrator in all sorts of ways.
Yes, yes. Wow.
Uses them as a kind of double vision.
Oh, I like that.
For the
double
characters
vision.
of Achilles, character of Achilles himself.
It's like my vision, which is when I'm not wearing glasses, one eye is for reading and the other is for kind of seeing far away, but maybe not so far away anymore.
I'm thinking, Greg, of this essay that you wrote recently that's published on Classical Inquiries about the reception of Homer.
Yes.
Homer
yes.
kind of has to resign himself to the tradition or consign himself to the gentle
Yes.
or otherwise hands of the tradition. And Patroklos too. His
Yes.
identification with Achilles is shaped by forces outside of his control.
Oh, you said it so beautifully. And of course, it says, Keith says it beautifully because he's the editor of Classical Inquiries. So it's like I think he's the dominant self and I'm the recessive self.
Wow. I'm certainly working with good source material here. I'll have to give you credit for
You
that,
said
Greg.
that beautifully, dear Keith, beautifully. You know, that's what editors can do for authors.
Well, let's reconvene in a week for hours 7 and 8. Thank you for
I
this
can hardly
wonderful
wait.
discussion.
These are great hours, and let's have a round of applause for the participants who are, I think, really following. I am just so thrilled.
All right. See you next time.